All right, partner. Keep on rolling, baby. You know what time it is. Is it time to listen to Limp Bizkit? Well, of course it's time to listen to Limp Bizkit. It's always time to listen to Limp Bizkit. But it's also time to talk about that fight between the Minotaur and the Green Dragon. I had a really good time filming that. I want to say a big thank you to my son for being the special guest during that fight. We had a good time recording that video together. And yeah, it was a heck of a fight. It kind of seemed like the Green Dragon was just running away with it in the early rounds, but then he seemed to run out of steam in the second half of the fight. And that's right about when the Minotaur started to come on strong. He had a big smash there and then a wallop. And then at that point, both fighters were feeling rather weak, and it was just anybody's fight. And then the Green Dragon finally found the mark and put that Minotaur away. And then came the destruction of poor Ali Baba. He got chased down and just smoked. Poor guy. He just wanted to referee the fight. It was kind of sad that it went down like that, but that's what happens sometimes. It's a doggy dog world. So, being the big nerd that I am, before the fight, I wanted to look at all the numbers and stick them into Excel and try and sort of make a prediction of who was going to win. So it was kind of an interesting calculation and it didn't quite work out. But we'll take a look at it here. And so I just put in all the stats here and then I looked at melee range and hand-to-hand range separately. You can't really predict what the AI is going to do, but it mostly seems to favor hand-to-hand combat, where they kind of jump onto the same square, and the probabilities for hits change when that happens. So I was reading through the game manual and kind of figuring out the formulas for how the probability of hitting an enemy is calculated and the amount of damage that they do and stuff like that. So I figured that according to the manual, the chance of hitting someone in melee range is 0.03125 times their dexterity, or well, 3.125%. So for the Minotaur, that came out to 46.9%, and for the Green Dragon, 31.3%. But that wasn't taking into account that the Green Dragon is especially easy to hit. He has that CC thing beside his dexterity score. So the Minotaur gets a plus 25% chance to hit the Green Dragon because he's so big and easy to hit. So then the damage that's calculated is just their average damage times 2 minus 1. So for instance, the Minotaur's damage roll is going to be 2 random die rolls of 10 added together and minus 1, and that's going to be the result. But the average should come out to 10. So I figured his average damage times his chance of hitting would be the average damage he would deal per round, which for the Minotaur at melee range came out to 7.2, and for the Green Dragon 4.1. So it seems like the Minotaur is going to have better damage output at melee range. And I thought at first that I could just take that number, the average damage he's going to do per round, and then subtract from that the amount of damage that's going to be canceled by the Green Dragon's armor here, which was 5. I thought I could take 7.2 and subtract 5 from it and sort of get the average damage that he's going to do to him every round, and then based on that, divide his constitution by that number and calculate the number of turns it should take the Minotaur to kill the Green Dragon. I initially did that calculation, but as you can see, the cells are blank now because I figured out that it doesn't really work that way. And the reasons why are a bit confusing. I'm not that great at statistics, but what I did figure was if you imagine a hypothetical scenario where one of the combatants has like a really low probability of hitting the other one, but a really high damage roll when they do hit them, um, then you're going to get a very small number for their average damage per round, right? And if you subtract the armor score from that, it'll probably come down to 0. And then if you are dividing by that number to figure out the number of turns it's going to take to kill, where you're going to be dividing by 0 and you're going to get an undefined result. So that's kind of a counterexample to prove that that method of predicting how many turns it should take with average luck to kill the enemy, it just doesn't work out that way. And I think, I don't know, it seems to come down to the, the variability in the amount of damage that's subtracted by the armor, right? Because it can't subtract more damage than you actually dealt. So for instance, if you're doing 3 damage, um, it's going to subtract 3 from that, not 5, because you can't go below 0 with the damage. And on the rounds where you didn't even hit them at all, then you're not subtracting any damage. But if you're kind of assuming that the armor is sort of applied every turn by making it into an average, then it just kind of blows up the calculation and doesn't make sense. I don't know. Someone who's good at statistics probably knows the proper explanation for all that stuff. I'm just kind of trying to hack my way through it. But anyways, I figured out that my prediction of the number of turns for them to kill each other was way off. So I just kind of deleted that. So then I did the same sort of calculation here for what happens at hand-to-hand range. So you can see the difference here is the strength. So the combatant with the higher strength score gets whatchamacallit, a bonus to their chance to hit the other guy. Because at first I didn't realize, or I forgot to account for that in my calculations, and I couldn't figure out why the green dragon was connecting so often. Because I had figured his chances at hitting the Minotaur was around 30%, but then it turned out he was hitting him like almost every time, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized it was the strength thing that's making the difference there. And I think the strength calculation also applies to the weaker of the two as well. I think the weaker combatant actually takes a penalty on their chance of hitting the other character. It's not quite clear from the game manual on that point, but when I applied it that way, it just seemed to match up with the what I saw in the game better. So I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I would love to be able to get into the code of the game and really sort of figure out if that's how it's actually calculated. But I don't know how to disassemble Apple II code. And maybe one day I'll get into it, but not today. So anyway, so yeah, the Minotaur had still a higher chance of hitting the green dragon, and because of that and his higher damage output at hand-to-hand range, his average damage he's going to deal per round is really a lot higher. So from just from looking at this, it kind of looks like, oh, the Minotaur is dealing a lot more damage. He's probably going to win, right? But it doesn't take into account the armor and the constitution, and those I think seem to tip the scales way more into the green dragon's favor. Um, so since my calculations here didn't really yield a good prediction of what really should happen on average over, how the long run, I decided to just run back the fight a bunch of times and collect the statistics and sort of see if it matched up with what numbers I did predict here, and it kind of did. So over here, I just kind of ran the fight back 9 more times, and I recorded how much damage was done on each hit and whether that damage was dealt from melee range or hand-to-hand range, and for the green dragon the same thing. And I didn't count hits when he was unconscious because the hit probability changes with that, so I just kind of ignored those ones. So I ran all those numbers and then kind of crunched them down here, and I figured out how much damage the Minotaur did in total from melee range was 178, which is seems like a lot, but it's not really that interesting. But the average damage he did from melee range came out to 9.9, and I was like, okay, does that match up with his stats? And lo and behold, his melee damage average should be 10, and it came out to 9.9, so right about on the money. And his hit percentage that I calculated based on like the real world experiment was about 82% from melee range. And back here you can see that we had calculated it should be about 71%. So I guess he was a bit lucky. He was hitting a 10% higher than than his average calculated would be. And then from hand-to-hand range, similar kind of story. His average damage was 9.8. And based on what we see here, he was a little bit unlucky there. We would expect his average to be 12, but just based on his stats. And the percentage of hits was about 60%. And down here we had calculated it should be about 79.3%. So I guess he was unlucky with his hand-to-hand hits, the Minotaur. Poor guy. And for the Green Dragon, similar kind of numbers. He only actually had one melee strike the whole 9 times that I ran the little simulation. So his hit percentage was really low at 11%. His average damage was 14, which is higher than we would expect, but obviously there's not a big enough sample size to make much of a difference. So he was a little bit lucky with that. He got 14. We would expect his average to be 13. And what did I say his hit percentage was? 11% from melee range. And back here we had calculated that it ought to be about 31%, so he was kind of unlucky from melee range. But like I say, not enough sample size to really, for that number to really mean anything. And his average damage at hand-to-hand range was about 10. And if we look back here, we would expect his damage to be 9, so he was a little bit lucky there. And his chance of hitting, or his number of hits averaged out was 67% from hand-to-hand range, and we had calculated that to be about 67%, so in the ballpark, pretty close. So yeah, overall it seems like the game calculates things the way it says it does. And I forgot the most important part. So the Green Dragon actually won all 10 fights, all 9 that I ran after, and the one that we already saw in the previous video. I think I did do a couple of runs before we recorded the video, and I recall the Minotaur did win one of them. But the Green Dragon went 10 for 10 on the ones that I actually recorded and analyzed. So it was not a fluke. He is definitely the stronger of the 2 fighters, which is good to know. That's what we wanted. That was the question we wanted to answer, and we answered it. Green Dragon, definitely the king of the hill, the champion, the baddest man on the planet. So I thought I'd show sort of how I lured the Green Dragon over to the Minotaur's den to get them to engage in combat. What I did was I got a gang of dudes together and I kind of arranged them so that they would all have a higher dexterity score than the Green Dragon and the Minotaur, so that I would go first and I could use that to kind of lure them. And I set them up also so that they would have sort of descending dexterity scores as they went through the rooms. So pretty much Luthien lured him in and then retired, and then that halfling, I missed his name, but Oh, Merrywater. Merrywater brings him onto the next screen, and then he retires. And then Stilbo is going to jump through the door. The green dragon will give chase into the next room, and just sort of on and on that way. Just retire this guy, and the next guy jumps through the door. The green dragon follows. And voila, you have Green Dragon versus Minotaur. And then I just spawned in Alibaba to be our special referee. He thought he was going to get an easy payday. Oh, in this case, Alibaba spawned, unfortunately, in the wrong spot there. He was right next to the Minotaur, which was not good because the Minotaur attacked him. But when I did it for the video that we actually recorded, he spawned clear of danger, and then the Minotaur went over and attacked the green dragon like we wanted him to. So yeah, that was how I lured the guys over there, and I've been trying to think of like other fights I can do and trying to figure out how feasible is it to lure enemies from one room to another, because I don't know, some of the fights I want to set up are going to require lots of luring of monsters, and I'm just trying to figure out how to make that all work. It'd be great if I could sort of hack the game and just spawn in monsters wherever I wanted, but I'm not willing to put in that level of effort at this point. I don't know, maybe one day, we'll see. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we shall see you in the next one.